Namaste. Good morning. Today, I'd like to touch upon the concept of the original sin in Advaita. Thereafter, take a few questions that have come on the email. So, there are two perspectives of the original sin. And we can see how it applies to us. The first perspective is what Joel Goldsmith considered as the original sin. For all practical purposes, he was a non-dual teacher, and his teachings were based on the teachings of Jesus. The second perspective is what Ramesh ji considered the original sin in Advaita. Now, for Joel Goldsmith, the original sin is the belief in two powers, good and evil. The whole foundation of his teaching is where he implores his students, people drawn to his teaching, to give up this belief in two powers. Now, what does this mean? Give up the belief in good and evil. As he says, Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden of evil because they believed in two powers. And this is pure Advaita. Because if all there is the source, all there is consciousness, then there is nothing which is not the source. There is nothing which is not God. There is nothing which is not consciousness. So this is pointing to the first pillar of duality. And that is why Goldsmith emphasizes on this. Duality, the structure of which is interrelated opposites of every conceivable kind. Up and down, male and female, black and white, left and right and wrong, and so on. The structure of duality. Now, what does this giving up the belief in good and evil mean? It means, as Rameshji so often said, that if we accept people for who they are, precisely as the way God made them, no one else could have made them, then, in other words, we have given up this belief in good and evil. The result of which is an absence of hatred, malice, envy, jealousy, and so on and so forth. So this dynamic of good and evil is no longer functioning as far as we are concerned. This is the beauty of the teachings presented by Ramesh ji when he says to see relationships in this light. Then all relationships are accepted the way they are. Now, the most common objection raised by the ego, even in Rameshji's satsangs, was, how can God create evil people? We can understand if God can create a Gandhi or Mother Teresa or whatever you consider an epitome of good, but how could God create evil people? So the question to be asked is, if God didn't create so-called evil people, who created them? Obviously, then it would imply someone more powerful than God. And then we would go into this split of duality, which would never end, in a perpetual regression of two. But with Advaita, we come to the still point, the point of singularity. All there is the source, consciousness, and the manifestation is a reflection of consciousness within itself. So does it mean we accept the Hitlers of the world? Certainly not. As far as actions are concerned, everyone is accountable. That is the functioning in daily living. There are social regulations, there are legal provisions, call it what you may. That is the flow of life. But with this understanding which Advaita brings, we are no longer seeing through the eyes of duality, but the eye of singularity. So we find in our own lives, whether it is people or situations we are confronted with, there's nothing that is not God. Even painful situations. The minute something comes to our awareness, or rather the second, it is accepted by our consciousness. The point is the human being is in conflict with this and tries to escape from something, reject something, and creates suffering. Whereas the sage has accepted the design of life is duality, sometimes pleasure, many times pain. And he goes with the flow of life, doing precisely that which he thinks and feels he should do. So if you find in your life that you are no longer labeling people or situations as good or evil, you are no longer swinging wildly between these polaric opposites, then it is a sign of understanding being lived. Let's say someone in your life used to really push your buttons, upset you, and you came across this teaching. And now you view that relationship in a different light. there's more understanding. And as Goldsmith says, understanding brings impersonalization. We are no longer targeting an individual when we accept that they have been created by their genetics and conditioning. We are no longer pointing a gun at someone's head in that sense and blaming them and accusing them and condemning them. Yet we are faced with the person who has pushed our buttons. But now our approach is slightly different from what it was earlier. And that represents the dawn of a new understanding in relationships. So this is a very important tenet of Goldsmith's teachings, which is so in sync with Advaita. And that is why Rameshji would never tire of saying consciousness is all there is. So the segmentation, that starts dissolving. Something good happened to me, something bad happened to me, because good and evil are concerned with the me. So when you accept that the same electricity functions through everyone, when you accept the fact that the design of life is duality, you stop running away from people or situations. And you stop even confronting people and situations. After all, running away and confronting are also interrelated opposites. But you bring a kind of space, awareness, witnessing presence to what is in front of you. That is the transformation that happens. Transform. The forms are transformed. Because objects are no longer viewed as objects alone, but as the presence animating them. Give up the belief in two powers. Because if God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-pervading, there is nothing that is not God. As simple as that. Now let us see what Rameshji says. Is the original sin according to Advaita. It is one object considering itself the subject and passing judgment on another object without realizing that it too is an object in manifestation. One object passing judgment on another object. means I pass a judgment on someone. This person is like this. I have forgotten. I too am an object created by the source, the same source. And my judgment is based on my filters, my genetics, my programming, my conditioning, which makes me view life a certain way. But somehow I assume that the way I view life is the right way and everyone else is wrong. So, as Rameshji says, this object has usurped the subjectivity of the source. I've become a pseudo subject. If I find myself passing judgment on people and situations, I have completely forgotten where I come from. And I assume I know best. And therefore, as he says, the original polarity of me and the other has become me versus the other. I am always in conflict with the other, competing with the other, my view over your view, my opinion over your opinion. And this is how relationships get destroyed. We don't even have the courtesy to hear another person out, understand where they are coming from, accept that their view is valid for them. Even that much we don't allow, you see. This is a very important point. Every time you feel you know best, you have taken over the role of the original subject. And that is why the man of understanding will not engage in endless arguments. He may still put across his point. He may have a point. He may have a view. But he will not commit the violence of trying to force his point of view on the other. Many of us are guilty of that, you see. Violence in very subtle forms. So as Rameshji says, that while the structure of life is duality, what happens is we convert that basic structure to dualism. In other words, we convert our imprisonment from a simple imprisonment to a rigorous imprisonment. It sounds harsh, some of you might say. But as Maharaj said, you, referring to consciousness, have squeezed yourself into the volume of a body and the span of a lifetime. All right. I'll take some questions now which have come on the email. I really need some suggestions in my current situation through which I am in. I had my third missed abortion the day before yesterday in my 5th month of pregnancy. This time I prayed a lot and tried all means, whatever I could. Is this like nature does not want something and I am trying hard to fulfill my motherly love? Or is it like my destiny is telling me that I should leave trying to get a baby, which every lady wants to complete her motherhood? In one of the videos of Gorakhnath, you told that which we ask for is water and which comes spontaneously is milk. Am I really trying for a thing which nature does not want to give me? Thank you for sending this question in. And of course, you have been following the teachings if you are referring to the Gorakhnath video. It's a very pertinent question. The Gorakhnath video is based on a couplet. सहज मिला सो दूध बराबर, मांग लिया सो पानी, खींच लिया सो रक्त बराबर, गोरख बुल्ले बानी. What comes unasked is what is meant for you. It is like getting milk. सहज मिला सो दूध बराबर, मांग लिया सो पानी. If you ask, you get water. खींच लिया सो रक्त बराबर. When you snatch from someone else or take what belongs to someone else, you get blood. Thus spake Gorakhnath. So here we have a situation where a woman is trying hard to have a baby, 3 failed attempts. And the most valid question, based on these teachings, should I take it that I am trying too hard, exercising too much doership? And should I stop? Or should I go with my innate nature of wanting to be a mother and continue? Now, this teaching will not answer the question for you. It says, do precisely that which you think and feel you should do, knowing that the results are not in your control. So, if you feel that the urge to be a mother is so strong, and you are able to bear the pain, the physical and emotional pain, by all means continue. If you feel the urge is so strong, but you are not able to bear the pain anymore, consider other options like adoption, surrogacy, whatever it may be, whatever options are available. And if you feel that I have done enough, I have tried hard enough, now I let it go, so be it. Now, which of these options you choose is based on your conditioning, your nature, how God has created you, and therefore it is your decision. But the fact is, it has been a difficult process. Most difficult process of disappointment, unfulfillment, and so on. So that has to be looked at. Now, for example, I know a couple, they wanted a child very much. And the wife went through 5 cycles of IVF treatment unsuccessfully, and then finally got a child. I know other couples who gave up after the first or second attempt, saying that this is not for us. So everyone is made differently. There's no one size fits all answer to this. But because you are drawn to this teaching, you are seeing your situation in this light, and you have to take a call. So may the teaching be with you when you take this call. To decide what next. And one misperception here is that it is every woman's wish to bear a child. That is not entirely true. There are many women who are quite clear they are not built for motherhood, and so have opted out of that option. This is a question on the guru-disciple relationship. Someone who is questioning the validity of this relationship. It's a long mail, so I'll just read it out in parts. If it appears disjointed, then that's my inability. The teaching of Advaita has brought immense peace in my life through the various teachings. I cannot deny this because I have directly experienced it for myself. However, there is another aspect to spirituality I cannot deny, and that is blindly following a teacher or teaching in the name of surrender. It is clear that we don't surrender to the living organism that is imparting the teaching. Instead, we surrender to the higher self that manifests as the living guru. But how many of us have the consciousness to absorb this truth? If we become a follower or disciple, we subconsciously produce cognitive dissonance when we listen to the teaching. The teaching points to the I am while we remain stuck as devotees or disciples. I am not questioning what you teach or what Rameshji said in his satsangs, but the traditional aspect of the teaching that strongly emphasizes the guru-disciple relationship. And then the letter goes on to cite examples of intimidations, extortions, killings, and whatnot that have taken place of some well-known spiritual gurus. In my experience, it's better to be a skeptic than be a blind follower who never questions anything. I understand what you mean when you say that deliverance takes time. But how can deliverance happen when the mind remains closed and wants to attach itself to the teachings, concepts, and spend a lifetime as a devotee? My question is, are we really opening our minds through these ancient teachings, or are we drowning deep into a river of self-delusion? So, I'll read this out, couple of lines by line. There's another aspect to spirituality that I cannot deny, and that is blindly following a teacher or teaching in the name of surrender. I completely agree with this point, actually. And in fact, Rameshji was the one to say that be a skeptic, ask questions till you are convinced that whatever teaching has appealed to you is having a direct impact on your daily living. If not, it is just theory. So by all means, if your mind is structured such that it wants satisfaction through answers, ask your guru, ask your teacher, and then decide. Someone else may be built another way, may not have too many questions to ask. So we have to do precisely that which we feel we should do. It is clear that we don't surrender to the living organism that is imparting the teaching. Instead, we surrender to the higher self that manifests as the living guru. Now, this part is actually, I'd like to shed some light on this. You see, when in Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, there's this story of this man who climbed mountain after mountain to meet Mahavatar Babaji and finally met him and fell at his feet. And Babaji had a few close disciples around him. And he came to Babaji and said, I finally found you. And Babaji said, is it so? And then he told this disciple to go and jump off the mountain top. And the disciple did that and was resurrected by Babaji. Now there is a point in this story, because the question asked is that it is clear that we don't surrender to the form of the guru, but to the teaching. You see, these are not separate. If I am a devotee of Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi and I say that I surrender to his teaching of self-inquiry, but not to his form, that is a contradiction. because the body is the temple of the living God as far as the sage is concerned. The form is not secondary in that sense to the teaching. Why do you think when there have been such masters as Shirdi Sai Baba, Ramana Maharshi, why did so many devotees come to them and offer seva to the form, looking after the Guru, being in the presence of the Guru, asking about his needs, taking care of him? Otherwise, they could well reject that aspect of the physical form and say, oh, we are surrendered to the teaching. That is an intellectual understanding. A few bad apples here and there doesn't mean the whole harvest is bad, you see. It would have been quite a missed opportunity to be in the presence of such masters like Ramakrishna Paramhans, Anandamayi Ma, and say that, you know, we are drawn to their teachings and surrender to their teachings and not to the form. The form is the teaching. God in human form appears as the Guru is what our scriptures say. Guru as consciousness. But the ego that is still mired in duality is considering the Guru as a separate form, which represents the higher self, and looking at it with a split mind. Now, let's look at this another way. Whoever your Guru may be, because we are in the realm of form, the association takes place through form. So if I am truly surrendered to my Guru, he is in my consciousness all the time. He or she is in my consciousness all the time. The form of the Guru, the form of consciousness, is in my consciousness all the time. That is the surrender, not the physical surrender to the Guru. So this is an important point, that you cannot separate the form from the teaching. Otherwise, why would in India we venerate the form and put the body in samadhi after the prana has left the body of the sage? Why do we still go to these ashrams where the samadhis are there? And why are we drawn to them? Why do we worship them? We would have forgotten about it. So one swallow doesn't make a summer. You are quite right that there are these instances of abuse, killings, whatever it may be, as part of the duality of life and living. But if you have found a teaching which has really appealed to you, changed your life, so to speak, then you would be surrendered to the form as well as the teaching. Not in this subservient way which you feel it is going to be. After all, let's not forget that after someone like Nisargadatta Maharaj, after his 3 years of seeking, found what he was looking for and started teaching, make no mistake, there were 2 daily activities undertaken by him. One is himself cleaning all the photo frames of the sages in his attic, and the other is singing bhajans twice a day, because his Guru instructed him to. Do not leave it. And he would sing bhajans twice a day, and make no mistake, he would go to Banganga, I don't know if it was every week or how often, and offer his worship at Siddharameshwar Maharaj's Samadhi. So you may consider this a traditional view and have a different understanding of it, which is fair enough. But this is my understanding of the guru-disciple relationship, because we consider it two. The guru does not consider it two. For the guru, the way the guru sees the guru-disciple relationship is not the way the disciple sees it, but the disciple assumes the guru sees it that way. The guru who is established in the self will only see the self. Now imagine you had a life of turmoil, psychological suffering, and you met someone who showed you a different way to look at things, and it transformed your life. Completely. What was a life of agony, anxiety, stress, broken relationships, transformed to a life of equanimity, peace, and calm. There could be no limit to the surrender for such a transformation, because all surrender is surrender to God, consciousness, not to an individual labeled as the guru. One last question, and then if anyone would like to ask anything, they are most welcome to. On your 8th August 2021 talks, you said to be simply present when a person is arguing and fighting with you. Now, even this, the other ego doesn't like, and the ego of the other starts accusing you. I try to remain quiet and not to talk, but my sibling, whose ego gets hurt when I don't talk to her, starts accusing and shouting at me in such a manner that it becomes unbearable. And when I stop talking to her, my mother, who is a neuro patient, forces me to talk to her. And if I don't do so, my mother's health suffers. My mother knows that my sister is wrong, but even then she forces me to talk because she knows that no one can make my sister understand. I have to obey my mother's instructions, and by all this, my sister's ego grows day by day. So my question is, what a person should do in such a situation when he wants to just remain quiet and be a witnessing presence, but his conditions don't allow him to do so. It's a very sad situation. It's a very real situation. It is a sad situation this boy is facing, because I am assuming his nature is to be quiet, not a forced quietness. Because if it was a forced quietness operating as a defense mechanism, then that would be an intellectual understanding of the teaching. But if his nature is to be quiet and he is forced not to be quiet, that is an unfortunate situation. because the other does not realize that they are inflicting a subtle form of violence on the one whose preference is to be quiet by forcing them to talk. Because the norm is we should talk, we should express ourselves. It is not accepted that someone can express themselves in quietness. It is not accepted. You see, the ego rejects this position. And so my sympathies are with this boy. If the nature is to be quiet. You see, as the cliche goes, you can't argue with silence. And so it can be very frustrating when one of the two parties in the argument is silent. The world, unfortunately, is a world of domination and control in very subtle forms. I believe the shamanic wisdom calls it the process of domestication. Not only do we want to control others, how they should be, but we want to control their thoughts and how they should think. Now, what does this boy do in this situation? He has a mother who is not in good health, who tells him, "Beta, talk to your sister." A tough spot to be in. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. The teaching cannot give him an answer as to what he should do. But he should do precisely that which he thinks and feels he should do. Now, there are some implications here. He has to decide, has he reached a point, a tipping point, where he can no longer take this, in which case he needs to sit with his mother and explain to her the fact that he has reached a tipping point. If he has not reached the tipping point and he feels his love for his mother is so strong that he is not happy to bear it, but is able to bear this dynamic which is constantly carrying on, so be it. He has to decide this, you see. But what does tend to happen here, especially in the Indian structural conditioning, is that the child follows the parents' suggestions and instructions to the T. Perhaps the Western child would be more of a rebel in that sense. I don't know much about that, but this is what happens. And like I said in the beginning, if he is truly following the teachings, he has to ask himself, is my quietness an enforced quietness or is it a natural quietness? Because if it is enforced, then that is something for him to look at also, because it is not natural. But by and large, I find myself on the side of people who are accused of not being expressive enough, because I was guilty of that crime too. And I must say, I took solace in none other than Vimlananda. When I read in one of the Agora books where he said that even to say the words, I love you, the tongue burns the Shakti, and the I love you, which is unspoken, is far deeper than the spoken I. Now, I am not saying one should not say I love you, because immediately that's going to be the conclusion drawn. But I am saying that forcing someone to be expressive when it is not their nature is simply not fair. Nisargadatta Maharaj said the meaning of a word exists even before it is spoken. The words don't give the meaning. All right. If anyone would like to ask something or share something, they are welcome to. A couple of things. I would like to thank those who have been helping with the talks. Divya, Bhargavi, Harish, and Sangeeta. A lot of back-end work is going on, which makes this possible. More so because I am quite technologically challenged. So it helps to have a support structure. And the other thing I'd like to share is that for those who are interested in understanding the dynamics of seeing life and spiritual evolution through the subtle body system, which is the chakras and the kundalini. My mother, as some of you might know, that is her subject because her awakening happened through this process. She is conducting a Zoom course, which is starting on 27th November. And she will take a course of 12 weeks, once a week, where she will go through her process of awakening and all the drawings which emerged of the unfoldment at various levels of the subtle body, what they mean in terms of common language, what does spiritual awakening mean in terms of the chakras, kundalini, and so on and so forth, which got triggered for her by asking the question, who am I, where do I come from, and where am I going? So if this interests you, you can write to info@santoshsachdeva.com for further details. All right. Yes, Holger.
Namaste, Gautam. I just wanted to say how good it feels to be here.
Thank you.
And the Western child I experienced was rebellious.
Can you elaborate on that?
I had very young children. No, not children. My parents were very young, like 18, 17 and 18. And I never had this feeling I really have parents. They were more like friends on one level. And in many regards, I was just missing like some structure or some deeper resonance with my parents, like that I could look up to them, or I don't know how to explain it. Never really tried. Yeah, but this one point you mentioned, challenging other people. This is something what somehow I did very often, purposely trying to challenge someone. And so this is also just ego.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, 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 yes. And I even had this idea I'm doing something good because I'm helping the other person to come out of that little ditch. Yeah, it's totally ego. Yes, 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 yes.
But yet, you are not doing it in the sense that it's based on your own genetics and nature, and that's what was happening for you.
Yeah. Wow. And on one level, duality is such a genius.
Yes.
I mean, the interrelated opposites are not the problem.
Yes. You see, it is not the interrelated opposites as you're saying. It is the doership that gets imposed on the interrelated opposites. And this wanting to be on only one side of the river.
Yes.
That is the problem.
Yes. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to share with you all that I was at a pilgrimage spot in North India, and it is actually the Ganges. You know, the Ganges is made up of two rivers, for some of you who may not know it, actually three rivers. They come together at a place called Devprayag. One is the Alaknanda, the other is the Bhagirathi, and the third is the unseen river, Saraswati, the river of knowledge. And one of them is rough and fast flowing, and the other is a very still kind of flowing river. I think the Bhagirathi is, and they all come together and merge together to form the Ganges. And so this came up because we are talking of duality, the structure of duality, and how everything merges so beautifully with this, the highest teaching of Advaita, relatable to daily living and not as a concept, which I keep emphasizing on, which brings everything to a one point, you see, the point of singularity, which is the point of God, consciousness. All right. Yes, Kumar.
Namaste, Gautam sir. So good to be here. So I had a question. So I had some, bullying incidents in school, and they never came up for me before I started meditation. I started attending the satsangs. I started introspecting. As in so, for the past 3-4 years, those incidents keep replaying in my dreams over and over again, like every 2 days. So it's quite frequent. So it's accepted. But I was just wondering whether these impressions can ever be dissolved or they stay in your subconscious and you can just be disidentified and they'll continue to run forever, like as Freud says. Or maybe that psychology aspect is not as accurate.
No, you have actually expressed it very beautifully, Kumar. The whole point is because all this is absorbed subconsciously. So while it was not in the conscious mind, it's coming up now because it's being thrown up, so to speak, in dreams, right? But the beauty is when you see bullying for what it was, nobody had control over it. Everyone was playing their role like a character in a movie. When the sense of doership is removed from the bullying and there's no one to accuse and blame, but knowing it happened because it was meant to happen at that time, then let the reel continue to play. You are not concerned with it at all. What normally perpetuates recurring dreams, if we are still identified with certain aspects of it, what is our feeling? Are we just witnessing it as far as the dream is concerned, or are we really feeling those emotions? That is a pointer. Now, from what you have described, I don't see this kind of push of the emotions as when the dreams arise, in which case, let it play out. It is irrelevant.
Thank you so much.
If those feelings are there of fear, anxiety at being bullied, then of course that is to be looked at either through the prism of the teaching or even through therapy. It all depends, you see. So that's a very nice question you asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Would anyone else like to ask a question or share anything they'd like to? We can take this as the last question. Yes, Ramanathan.
Namaste, Gautam. Thank you. It looks like been going through certain conflicts, and today's satsang was extremely helpful to lift some of the burdens that I've been carrying, some guilt I've been carrying. I wanted to ask you this question. Normally, I don't engage in any conversations. For example, we have so many WhatsApp groups. I don't, college or school, I don't engage in any of them because I can't handle streams of information. I find it difficult to handle streams of information. So I never participate in any groups. But recently I came across a situation where someone took a stand against the country, right? I understand one has to be a witness if this is a drama and we don't need to carry the burden of what we are witnessing. But if someone takes a stand against a country, my country, and then there is a reaction, and there was a showdown against, because a serious disagreement I had, because one can't live in this country and actually accuse this country and say this is not a country at all. So I took serious exceptions to that, and it resulted in some breakdown in me. But fortunately, I'm healed now. I see that in a proper perspective. As you rightly mentioned in previous example, they reached a tipping point, but the burden is not going, that guilt is not going through. So why did I actually confront? But there is also this point that if I don't stand up for my country, I'm actually not doing it. It's not right on my part. So how does one reconcile these two?
You see, Ramanathan, you did precisely that which you thought you should do at the moment. The guilt is in judging that that was not the right thing to do. If you were designed in such a way that you are patriotic and someone says something, that is the natural flow of life, that you will stand up. That should not be resisted. This teaching is not saying don't be your natural self. What has happened is you have judged your own reaction as something that should not have happened, and therefore guilt has come in. This is a very important point to understand. Now, the question is, as long as it is seen that whoever triggered you was also playing their part in the movie, based on their genetics and conditioning, which triggered you, there is no carry forward of hatred. What had to happen happened as a movement in consciousness. Based on my nature and conditioning as being patriotic, I stood up for my country, and that's the end of it. As long as in my mind, I am not carrying hatred to this person who spoke against my country, did this, did that, how dare he say this, how does he this, that. If that dialogue is absent, then it is a most beautiful expression of what has happened. There has been a disagreement, so be it. So the guilt is because you are judging your reaction as it should not have happened. That is the classic game the ego plays. It comes in through the back door, which is what has happened. But if there is the full understanding, I have been designed to be patriotic by God. Of course, I will stand up when someone says something against the country. But thereafter, it's done. I'm at my next task, whether it is my startup company, whether it is talking to my family, whether it is meditating. Shanti. But if I'm carrying on in my mind that dialogue, he said this, so I said that, he did this, so I said, then there's psychological suffering. Simple.
Thanks, Gautamji. I think that extremely helps. That's the problem that I'm going through. That I'm judging that and I'm replaying that. Replay happens, keeps happening.
We all do that. That is the ego functioning, and even that can be witnessed. That is the beauty of this. Even that can be witnessed as an antic of the ego. There's no limit to witnessing. Isn't that amazing?
Thank you. Thank you, Gautamji. I can't express my gratitude more than this. Thank you.
Thank you. By all means, I mean, we have to do exactly the things we are designed for. What could be wrong in standing up for your country? As long as you are not trampling on and standing over others' opinions. You may not agree with them and make your point pretty clear. No harm in that. But it was a movement in consciousness which happened because it was meant to happen. It does not mean because I have taken to this path that I have to be an epitome of Sukha Shanti, Ramna, meditating and all that, and I should not be perturbed. Certainly not. Shirdi Sai Baba had anger flaring up like you cannot believe. He could read the minds of people who were coming to visit him and know their thoughts from where they started their journey and what was their motivation, and anger would arise. Sometimes he would tell someone who came in front, you've come to me, I know why you've come to ask me for so and so, and that person would be shocked, and then he would flare up in the moment. Someone else may be patriotic and may not be that driven to express their point of view. So there's no better way or more effective way. It's all so spontaneous. The flow and the movement of life and living is spontaneity. That is why when Nisargadatta Maharaj was asked if someone came with a gun to you, what would you do? His answer was, I don't know what will arise in the moment. No predetermined action, you see. Why? Because he is not the doer. All right. I'm going to change the screen so I can see all of your beautiful people. I get a bit rusty when there's a gap in the Zoom sessions. There's a potential trip to Pune, but I'm not sure whether there will be an informal meetup. This is on the 30th, around the 30th of November. But if there is, then we will send a message out for those of you who are in Pune, which would be very restricted kind of numbers. So we'll keep you posted on that.